My son stole his dead mother's ring for his girlfriend, and now he won't talk to me. After making him return it, to say I was mad as hell would be an understatement. I have a son, Jake, 23, and that's a fake name. Jake was a good kid growing up, so him doing this was a complete shock to me. I have a daughter too, Amber, 16, and that's also a fake name. When my wife passed away from cancer nearly 2 years ago, she already had a will in place. She was immunocompromised due to a prior condition she was diagnosed with a decade before she passed, and she made sure she had a will set, just in case anything happened to her. In that will, she divided her assets between her children, and Jake got his cut, as he was already 21. He used that money to put a down payment on a condo, and he also got his mother's car. But the will stated that my daughter was to get all of my wife's jewelry, which included a vintage gold ring with a diamond that had a light blue sapphire on each side of it. That ring has been passed down for generations in my wife's family. It was originally her grandmother's wedding band. Her husband was a jeweler and handcrafted the ring for her himself, and it was passed down to my wife's mother when her grandmother died, and then to my wife herself. When her mother passed, it, along with the other jewelry, was to all go to my daughter. When my wife passed away, my grief was intense, but I powered through it for the sake of my family, and they supported me 100%. So the betrayal from my son was just a rusty knife in the back for me for the past 8 months. Jake has been dating Sarah, a fake name, and she has my son wrapped around her finger as she adorns herself with jewelry. A lot. My son mentioned the family jewels my wife left his sister to Sarah one day, and Sarah really wanted to see them. So Jake went into my room when no one was home and showed them to her. He later admitted to me that he'd done this, and I was angry, but I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. Jake came to me a week ago and begged for that ring from his mother's family jewels so that he could propose with it, he said. Sarah had fallen in love with the ring when she saw it before, and he just knew it would be the perfect ring to ask her to marry him with. He seemed completely convinced I'd be jumping for joy for him wanting to propose, but instead, I told him that I was not the one to ask, as the ring belongs to Amber, and I wouldn't have him pressuring her to give it up. For a fair chance, I'd allow him to explain his reasons and ask her for it once, but only once, without pressuring her, and if she refused for any reason, that would be the end of it. Jake agreed and asked Amber for the ring right in front of me, but she told him no because she wanted to keep it in the family, and she has always loved that ring. To her, it's priceless. She couldn't bear to ever give it up. I told Jake that was that, and to not press the matter further. Jake left looking very unhappy about not getting the ring, but I thought he'd let it go and look into finding a similar one. But he came back another day while I was at work to talk to his sister after she got home from school. He and Amber got into a huge fight about the ring, and Amber called me crying. I called Jake and told him to get out of my house and leave his sister alone. Jake yelled at me that he should have just as much right to the ring as his sister because my wife was his mother too. But I reminded him he got a lot of his mother's money in her car. The jewelry is Amber's and only hers. He hung up on me, and Amber soon texted me that he left very angry. Later, right before I left work, my daughter called and told me that Jake came back. He walked in dressed in a suit, went into my room, and took something, then left without saying anything to Amber. She tried to keep him from leaving, but he shoved her out of the way. I rushed home as soon as my shift was over and checked my wife's jewelry box. The ring was gone. I immediately called Jake, but he didn't answer. So I messaged him that I would get the police involved if he didn't return the ring. Using it to propose won't stop me from taking it back. That finally made him talk to me, and he tried to say that I couldn't do that to him because he's my son. I said I can and will because he outright stole the ring, and he'd better bring it back right away or I would take drastic measures. Well, he phoned me right after that. I'll even get a lawyer. Jake started crying and saying I couldn't do this to him. I told him, tough luck, he stole from both his sister and dead mother. I would not back down until the ring was returned. Jake wouldn't stop crying and making excuses, so I told him to have the ring back by morning or I would be moving forward with legal action. Jake is my son, but he still broke the law, and I couldn't overlook what he did. He said he'd be by in the morning to talk and ended the call while crying even more. Well, Jake did show up in the morning and brought his girlfriend with him to try and guilt us. Turns out she not only knew he stole the ring, she wanted to keep it anyway because she was completely in love with the ring. Since she first laid eyes on it, I told her I didn't care. She could have a jeweler make a copy of it or something, but the original doesn't belong to her. It belongs to my daughter and deceased wife. Jake begged me one more time not to make her give it back, but my daughter and I stood firm. Return the ring or face police and maybe even a potential lawsuit. Jake's girlfriend pulled the ring off her finger and dropped it in my daughter's hands, calling me an evil bastard. Then she left my house in tears. Jake started screaming at me that I may have just destroyed his relationship. I retorted that he did this to his own relationship by stealing a ring that didn't belong to him. What kind of son steals from his own sister and dead mother? That is beyond terrible. Jake had nothing more to say to me and walked out to follow after his girlfriend. I didn't get anyone else involved in the situation, but Jake did. He tried getting support from friends and family, but he got the exact opposite reaction he'd hoped for. They were all mad at him over what he'd done. I got many phone calls and messages from people offering me condolences and saying they were not on Jake's side. I tried to do damage control, but now everybody knows. It's been a week now, and Jake refused to speak to me. I've sent him detailed pictures of the ring just in case he wanted a jeweler to replicate it, but making a copy would be very expensive unless he used fake stones. And thus far, there has been no response. I don't know what the situation is with his girlfriend, if she even still is his girlfriend after what happened, but I still stand by the fact that Jake had to return the ring. I have since had all my wife's jewelry placed in a safety deposit box that only I have access to, and the jewelry will remain there until my daughter is 21. It may even stay there if she wants to keep it safe. That way, I know I'm in the right to have reclaimed the ring. However, I don't want my son to hate me, and I don't want the family to hate him. If anyone has any advice as to how to better mediate this situation without me giving away the ring or spending a lot of money, I'm all ears. Update: my son stole his dead mother's ring for his girlfriend and is now blaming me for his relationship ending. Well, my son's girlfriend Sarah has officially broken up with him. He's devastated and blaming me. Some previously pointed out that I gave him too much credit in saying he was a good kid. He used to be, but the person he is now, I just do not recognize. Whether he was always like this deep down, or if he just fell for the wrong person and let her change him for the worse, is a mystery to me. But it doesn't justify what he did after I forced him and Sarah to return the stolen ring. She apparently spent days crying in bed, then told Jake that she didn't want a different ring, no matter how much he told her he'd get her another one. She wanted my deceased wife's ring, and she couldn't imagine possibly having a different one for their engagement now that it had already been on her hand, even though it was only for a few hours and stolen. The last time I met someone who cried that much about being made to return stolen property, they were 4 years old. I heard more than one person say they thought Sarah was being a big baby about it. The situation was no secret because Jake spilled the beans looking for support from the whole family and his and Sarah's friends. As previous readers know, that backfired badly for them. Well, after Jake's failed gambit for support, all the local drama lovers latched onto the situation like barnacles to a boat, and they kept messaging me with more information, even though I wasn't asking. So I was being kept in the loop, even though Jake and Sarah weren't talking to me. My son had the pictures I sent him so that he could try and replicate the ring, and took them to a jeweler. The jeweler said he could make a similar ring based on the pictures, but I made my original post and asked me to bring the ring to a jeweler to get a proper quote on the cost of making a duplicate. I agreed to take an extended lunch break and meet at the local jeweler. I got the ring from the safety deposit box and guarded it closely. I could see Sarah's eyes light up with greed the moment she saw it again. She reached her hand out and asked to wear it just one more time, then pouted like a child. When I told her no, for all I knew, she'd take off running the second she had it. The jeweler looked at the ring very closely for a little while and said it was worth more than we thought, and a copy would cost a lot. The ring was decades old and expertly crafted by my wife's grandfather. Sometime in the 1940s, the jeweler sang its praises. Even the diamond and sapphires were decently large for an engagement ring. The ring itself didn't use a slim gold band, but a pretty thick and heavy one, made of what was estimated to be 18-karat gold. But there was more. The stones themselves were set in platinum, and the ring had many ornate floral carvings on it. The stones alone needed to make an identical ring were more than Jake's current budget, not including antique value. Making a copy of a ring like that with that variety of materials would cost a lot in time and labor because every part of it would have to be handcrafted. It was 5 times what Jake had saved. The best he could have done would be to make a down payment and then spend years in debt. Sarah enthusiastically wanted Jake to have the ring made anyway, but the cost was just too much. So, the jeweler suggested they have one made that just looks the same. It didn't need to be made of the exact same materials. They could use a center stone that just looks similar to a diamond and replace the platinum with a similar metal I can't remember the name of, but it would have reduced the cost by a lot. There was also a suggestion of looking for a modern ring that looks similar that's already made, which would be far cheaper as well. In fact, the jeweler already had 3 rings set aside that all looked somewhat similar, with a central diamond and sapphires, and all very reasonably priced. Jake was all for either idea when Sarah suddenly slapped him while calling him a cheap broke wannabe, then turned on her heel to me and called me an evil bastard again for taking the original ring back because it had already been given to her when Jake proposed and should still be hers regardless. Then she held up her hand, in the manner one does when they expect you to put a ring on their finger, and outright demanded the ring back, while saying it was her right to wear it, and that my daughter wouldn't need it because it would go to waste with her. She actually said it's not like my daughter would be doing the proposing to anyone, since a man could just get a different ring for her someday. Oh boy. Did that make me angry? And she clearly noticed because she took a couple of steps back. I looked her dead in the eye and said that my wife's family ring will never be hers. It wasn't Jake's to give away, and he knew it. That's why he went out of his way to steal it while I wasn't home, because he hoped I wouldn't demand it back if he used it. But neither he nor she ever had a right to it. Then I said that it's entitled people like her that are what's wrong with the world. Now she acts like whatever she wants should be handed to her, and she's lusted after my wife's ring ever since Jake first showed it to her. That whole speech was a bit long-winded with some conjecture, I know, but I just couldn't hold myself back verbally anymore. My wife used to tell me that if I wanted to insult someone, I'd always figure out exactly what to say. After I said all of that to Sarah's face, she aimed to slap me too, but I guess the look in my eyes was enough to make her turn away and storm out instead, while very loudly making some sort of unintelligible tantrum noises that hurt my ears. She even intentionally knocked down a counter display on her way out. Jake was glaring at me with absolute rage, but didn't say anything until I asked him why he was with this awful woman. And he just said that he loved her and followed after. To his credit, she is very beautiful, but it's really just skin deep. Sarah wouldn't talk to Jake for a while, and then a few days later told him they were through because she felt like he didn't value her enough to get her the ring she deserved, and that she couldn't imagine having a miser like me as a father-in-law. She said she felt thoroughly humiliated by me and cried that people all think she's a gold digger now. But I don't think they are wrong. I mean, she slapped my son just for suggesting they'd. Something tells me not, so I honestly feel like she just wanted the ring and nothing else. Right after the incident with the breakup, Jake did try to get in my house again while I wasn't home. To do what? I have no idea. But if I were to speculate, he may have been after the cash in my gun safe, or thought the family jewels were still in the house. I hadn't told him at that point that I'd had them stored away in a deposit box, and I really didn't want to think my own son would break in for either of those reasons. But he stole from us once. He could do it again. Someone here suggested I replace the locks on my house, and I did, so Jake's key would no longer work. I'm looking into getting cameras put in now too. My daughter Amber called me after Jake showed up and said she was terrified while he was banging on the front door and demanding to be let in. I called his cell and he didn't pick up, but I guess it spooked him because Amber said he left right after his phone started ringing. He has a set ringtone for me, so he knew it was me calling in an instant. Jake called later that evening, but before he could start yelling at me, I demanded to know what the hell he was doing trying to break into my house while I wasn't home earlier. He scared his sister, and she nearly called the police. Jake dodged the question by being angry about me changing the locks because I don't trust him. I said, damn right, I don't trust him, not after what he did. Jake fired back that I couldn't just be happy for him and that if his mom was still alive, she'd have wanted him to use the ring to propose. I saw red and said that if she wanted that, she'd have wed it to him. So he began whining and saying it was all my fault. He explained exactly what Sarah said when she broke up with him and how she called me a miser, among other things, then ranted about how I always thought Sarah was never good enough for him. But I pointed out he was putting words in my mouth. I never said she wasn't good enough for him. I barely knew Sarah, and I never once got in the way of him being with her till he stole the ring. He tried to deny that, but I asked him when I'd ever said anything bad about Sarah prior to the ring incident. He really sounded like he was thinking hard, but even he couldn't remember any actual time because I barely saw this woman ever while they were dating. I wasn't even aware they were dating until at least 3 months had gone by in their relationship. But that was all beside the point. What the hell was he trying to get into my house for this time? He refused to answer, so I answered for him. I said, if he was after the ring or any of the other family jewels, they've been moved to a secure, safe location only I have access to. And if he was trying to break into my safe for my emergency cash fund, there's no way he'd get it open. Or if he was there to do any sort of harm to his sister, I'd kick his ass myself. I may have hit the nail on the head with at least one of those things, because Jake just had a long, silent pause on the line. Then he told me he's made up his mind to put in for a transfer at his job and sell his condo. He wants to move as far away as possible and never speak to me again. His last words to me were to have a nice life with my favorite child. I don't understand on my stand how my son has so changed on this level. In just a year, I never actually called Sarah a manipulative gold digger. Until recently, I said she had my son wrapped around her finger, and she loves jewelry, though I guess that's not all that different in the long run. But in truth, she is a manipulative gold digger, especially after the drama act she put on to try and keep a ring that was never hers. I mean, she spent days in bed crying over a ring she knew was stolen, and then had her huge tantrum at not being able to get it back or copy it. And now, because of her, my son has chosen to wash his hands of me and his sister altogether. I am devastated, but at the same time, furious that my son would do such things just to appease this witch of a woman. He'd only been dating 8 months. That's not enough time dating before proposing. I dated my wife for over 2 years before popping the question. I shudder to think what things would have been like if that witch had married my son. I know Jake is going to blame me for a long time, and I'm not sure if we'll ever speak again. I hope one day we can reconcile, but for now, I think we need time apart. Amber is also very upset. She's extremely thankful I got the multiple family members have called or messaged him to tell him off, and his now former best friend even came to me to apologize. He and Jake got in a nasty fight over what he'd done, and when his own best friend since elementary school didn't see things from his side, Jake cut him off too. Jake's ex-girlfriend, Sarah, also got in trouble with her own family. Her parents contacted me to ask for my side of the story and then apologized for their daughter's behavior. They only knew a small bit of what happened, but were appalled to hear about the way she'd acted. Jake, they said, used to be a much kinder person, but in the past few years, she's changed so much. They are severely disappointed in her. They were also covering half of the rent for her current apartment, and are now telling her that when her lease is over, they will not be renewing it with her. She can either pay the full rent herself or look for somewhere else to live. And now she's going around cursing my name and saying, this is all my fault. What is it with people these days? It's like ever since all those memes about entitled people on the internet have exploded, it has just made more people like them. When I was Jake's age, I only saw people like that on rare occasions. Now they're everywhere. I've seen 2 in the local supermarket this year even, and they're spreading their toxicity like a flood on the world. I can only hope one day my son comes to his senses and finds happiness again, whether or not he chooses to speak with me ever again. I'll hold out hope he'll one day return to being the kind person he once was. Update. My son's ex was obsessed with the ring. I'll start this off by asking that people please stop messaging me for pictures of the ring. I've gotten many asking to see it for various reasons, some even because they want a similar ring made as well. Well, I made my daughter aware of this Reddit account, and she's proud of me for doing it, but she doesn't want pictures of the ring online, and that's her decision to make, because the ring is hers. I don't need to question her as to why. I just need to respect her decision. I also don't like the idea of posting pictures of it, because if it gets copied by total strangers, then it can no longer be unique. I was willing to let my son copy the ring because it was a family matter, but I won't be posting it for everyone to see and replicate as they please. I've already long deleted the pictures of the ring I sent Jake, and the ring is locked away in a bank vault right now. It will not remain there permanently, as I intend to get a better home safe to keep it in when I can afford it. In the past few weeks since my original post, I did have cameras installed, and I'm thankful I did. For those wondering if my son and Sarah would get back together, no, they did not. My son is apparently really selling his condo, and he's not spoken to me since our last phone conversation, where he told me to have a nice life with my favorite child after not getting his way. I've been to see my lawyer about my estate and got my will altered. I haven't written my son out, but he's lost a lot of the things he would have otherwise inherited for the time being. After having some time to think, I've realized I just can't feel remorse for Jake anymore after his actions. As of late, my daughter Amber, calling him a simp, seems to be an apt description once I found out what that meant. But I just don't want to be angry or sad about it anymore. Neither emotion is doing me any good, so for now, I'm just going to do my best to let it go and move on. Jake seems to plan on moving on without us. Anyway, hopefully in time he'll understand what he did wrong, but I can't change his mind. For him, I did run into my son's ex, Sarah, at a random place in town. She spotted me while I was with one of my friends in the middle of the local shopping mall. She called out to me while we were in front of a bunch of people and started booing me and calling me a greedy miser. I didn't really have to say anything to her because my friend laughed at her and called her a thief and a gold digger who just wanted my dead wife's ring because she couldn't have it. I saw half the crowd turn to look at her at once when he said that. Sarah flipped us off and stormed away while cursing my name and knocking over anything in her path. This included a small child who started crying in an instant. When she realized she'd hurt the kid, Sarah took off running. My friend and I helped the very pregnant mother of the child calm the kid down, and thankfully the kid was okay. Sarah showed up at my house later to yell that it's all my fault. Her friends are all saying I'm not at fault. Just because she wanted my dead wife's ring so bad, I'll make damn sure she never sees it again. What came next was more unintelligible screaming from her as she stomped back to her car. I'd hoped that was the end of it, but that girl just wouldn't leave well enough alone. For those thinking Sarah and Jake's personality shifts were due to drugs, I'm not sure whether or not to tell you I'm sorry that isn't the case. It was all them, which in Jake's case is a harder pill to swallow because it means he has no excuse for such a radical shift in behavior. Sarah was arrested last week for attempting to break into my house. The cameras I had installed caught her sneaking into my backyard and trying to break in. She tried to break open my back door with an axe and a trip. When the alarm I had installed went off, she ran off. But the cameras in front of the house caught video of both her and her car very clearly in my driveway. She also left the axe with her fingerprints on it on the ground before she ran. When the police got there, she was long gone, but they later found her at her apartment. They initially just wanted to arrest her for breaking my door and trespassing, but she went crazy on them and wound up getting pinned to the ground and frog marched out. This woman definitely has something mentally wrong with her. A few days after Sarah was arrested, I spoke to her parents again. They offered to pay for the broken door and then filled me in on some of the details. It seems substance abuse was not involved. They told me she was given substance tests at the station, and her system came back clean. And since she wasn't on drugs, I don't think Jake was either. But Sarah was found to be very mentally unwell. So I guess it was just her crazy that was contagious. Her parents promised me that I'll never have to deal with her again, as they plan to move her out of town once they've dealt with the legalities of her situation. They haven't contacted me again since, but I wouldn't say it's my business that they do either. I'm guessing, though, that Sarah likely needs major mental health treatment. So in a sense, I do feel a little sorry for her. Now, I knew Jake had to be aware of what happened with Sarah since everyone was talking about it, but he has not reached out to any friends or family. One of the people he works with has contacted me, though, and told me Jake is still openly very angry about what happened. He still believes the ring would have been a small price to pay for his happiness. But now that Sarah has been taken away, Jake has also shifted blame onto her, saying she's the crazy gold-digging woman who ruined his life. It seems all he can do is blame other people some more, until he accepts fault in his own actions. Then I don't think we can have a relationship. He's not going to do well in life if he can't take responsibility for his own actions. I just hope that some time alone, wherever he chooses to go, will help him to mellow out and understand where he went wrong. This is likely to be my last update here, unless something else goes wrong. And if no new posts show up in the coming months or years, then you'll all know everything is fine, at least as much as it can be considering the situation. Mini update. Stop trolling me. Most of what I've gotten on this site has been support, but there are a rare few that have been contacting me through personal messages, calling me everything from a bad father to a psychopath. These people really need to find a hobby or something. If their goal was to bring me down, it's not working. But it is annoying. Not a single one of them has offered me ideas on how I could have better handled the situation. Instead, they just want to yell at me. One of them has even had their account shut down, though, not because of anything to do with me. They were just a troll. And recently, another has contacted me with a fresh account that's just a day old. It could even be the same person for all I know. Do these people really have nothing better to do than contact me to rage for no good reason? If you have a negative opinion of me, try to at least offer constructive ideas on how you think I could have handled the situation better and how to better handle it moving forward, instead of calling me a father or a monster or a psycho or any other derogatory term they can find in their little black books of bad petty insults. People who only want to rage and argue won't make a situation they aren't even a part of any better. They're doing it just for their own egos. And you know, they're nuts. When they have nothing better to do than message a widower who struggled to try and keep his family together. Real mature people. If you trolls think I could have Grombur, then put the ring on his girlfriend's finger in less than an hour. I was treated like scum for making them return the stolen ring that belonged to my dead wife and had been passed to my daughter. I tried to help them at least copy the ring, but the gold-digging girlfriend acted like a spoiled, petulant child about it, because she couldn't have the original, and my son couldn't afford an exact copy. My son attempted to break into my house to possibly steal from me again after his girlfriend broke up with him. My son's ex tried and failed to publicly humiliate me, then assaulted a child. This ex-girlfriend took an axe to my back door and got arrested. And finally, my son is blaming literally everyone but himself, and he's gotten no support for his actions from anyone apart from the trolls that have contacted me here. If after all that, I'm still made out to be the villain, then than those people messaging me saying I need to get their heads checked. Yes, I changed the locks to my house. That's a natural reaction when someone enters your home and steals from you, even when it's your own son. No, I did not try to escalate the situation further. They did that themselves. I actually wanted to talk it out, but they just wanted to issue demands instead. When I was a kid, my parents always used to tell me, gimme never gets. Well, it certainly doesn't get my dead wife's ring, and I wasn't about to pay for the replica either. And you know what? When my wife died, my son was willed over 50 grand in his mother's car, and in exchange, my daughter got the family jewels. That was pretty fair. My son put all of that money into a down payment for a nice condo. And if anyone is wondering, I did put money towards my son's college and will be paying the same amount, accounting for inflation, to my daughter's college when she goes. I don't have a favorite child. I did everything I could to keep it all fair, but sometimes people just go bad, and there isn't much you can do about it. Someone messaged me saying that my son likely doubled down on blaming and decided to move away because his pride won't let him admit he's wrong. He just needs a fresh start in a place where no one knows him. I can understand that, but it still doesn't change the fact that he dug the pit he's sitting in right now. So now I have a son who hates me entirely for his own actions. A slew of people messaging me on the regular about my son out on Reddit, even though I don't ask them to. My daughter is scared out of her mind that her brother might come back and hurt her, and now I'm arranging to get her into therapy as soon as feasibly possible. I've got in my house a good security system, complete with cameras, which was proven to be a good thing when my son's ex tried to break down my back door. I wanted to talk it out. I wanted to help my son get better without enabling his bad behavior, but he refused and metaphorically slapped my hand away. So trolls, answer me this. How does all of that make me a monster? Final update, my son just left town. I was hoping for no more drama or anything of the like, but it just didn't stop. Yes, Jake sold his condo for how much? I don't know, but he probably made a profit flipping it. Last Saturday, he pretty much just took whatever he could fit in his car and left, from what I know. The last few weeks have been hectic for my son. People all over town know what he did because the gossip train never stopped. At one point, Jake nearly got in a fight with a man at a bar because this guy called him out in front of everyone there. I tried to take the initiative by going to see him one last time. I hoped maybe we could talk things out and make amends before he left town, because at this point, I'd realized his moving away was the best thing he could do for himself. He'd already destroyed his own reputation, and he's better off starting over somewhere else. But when I got there and knocked on his door, he refused to open it. I tried to say I only wanted to talk, and he told me through the door that there was nothing to talk about other than the fact I ruined his life. There was a bit of a pause where he was only speaking intermittently. Then he suddenly went on a rant about the ring and how I should have just let Sarah keep it. Then went on to say that I should have also offered to help pay for the copy. But it didn't matter anymore. Sarah was confirmed crazy, and they're through for good, just like he's through with me and his sister. Well, that got me mad, and I retorted that what he did was unacceptable. He assaulted his sister while stealing that ring from my house, for crying out loud. He's lucky I didn't have. I don't know if he rushed things with Sarah because he missed his mother, or because he's now the age I was when he was born, or whatever other reason he could have. But the fact still remains that he knew what he did was wrong and just won't admit it, and I'm tired of trying to stick up for him. I didn't escalate the situation with anyone. He and Sarah did that. I'm tired of being blamed by him for his own wrongdoings. That's the sort of thing narcissists and cowards do. His mother and I raised him better than that, and he should know that his mother wouldn't have approved of his actions, but she's not here to say it. It doesn't matter who you are. If you steal something that's not yours, you can't go blaming the person you stole from for being mad about it and doing whatever they have to in order to get it back. There was a silent pause on Jake's end for a few seconds, and then he said, "You, Dad." After he said that, I could hear him crying and hitting things inside. That's when I noticed down the hall that one of Jake's neighbors was poking her head out her door, and she went back inside the moment I looked at her. Yeah, this will end up right back in the gossip train. Jake refused to say anything more to me, so I just left. But when I was leaving the building, a police car pulled up right in front of the condo building. 2 officers got out of the car and asked my name. When I told them who I was, they said they had been called by someone in the building, saying I was trying to break into their apartment. I said I had an argument with my son through his door, but I didn't once try to force my way in, and I only touched the door to knock. I told the whole story of what happened and then pointed out which neighbor had been watching and listening and that the building had CCTV. One of the officers went up to talk to the neighbor, while the other detained me with cuffs. He was very polite and said that the cuffs were just to make sure, since they don't know who's telling the truth. I said, he's just doing his job, and he let me sit down on a bench nearby while we waited. The officer who went in the building called on the walkie. After about 10 or 15 minutes, I'm not sure since I couldn't look at my watch, but he said that the neighbor's story more or less matched mine, and there was apparently more than one neighbor who was listening and who corroborated the same story. Then he said he was going to talk to the building security and check the CCTV for that hallway. This took a fair bit longer. Again, I couldn't look at my watch. I just sat waiting on a bench near the entrance, but the kind officer pulled up a radio app on his cell phone and let me listen to it for a while to pass the time. The other officer, Finn, called back on the walkie and told his partner to uncuff me because the CCTV had cleared me. He said that while the audio wasn't great, you could see and hear enough to show I never once tried to force my way in. I was uncuffed, and after the other officer got back, the two of them briefly spoke to each other for a moment, then asked if I was the guy whose son stole his dead mother's ring. I confirmed I am, and asked how they knew. Then they both said that they'd heard about it through the grapevine, and after hearing my version of events, they put two and two together. One of them said he was in the office the day Sarah was arrested. Apparently, she was acting like a wild animal and trying to bite at them, and she made several threats from, "Do you know who my parents are?" to "I'm going to castrate you," although castrate isn't the actual word or words she used. I could only look embarrassed by it. All the officers told me to just go home and that I was probably better off not coming back. I just nodded and left. I saw the police go back into the building as I was leaving, likely to talk to Jake. I know it was him who called the police because his neighbors messaged me later on social media, saying that the officers gave him a solid chewing out for wasting police time to the point he was crying again. And I guess they also pointed out the ring incident and said that what he did was pretty low. I'm not sure how Jake took that, but it sounds like he heavily embellished what was going on when he called the police. And from the time I first arrived to when the police got there, he had to have called them right around when we started talking through the door. He's beyond lucky they didn't arrest him for calling them under false pretenses. I went home and was comforted by my daughter Amber, and she told me I tried, and it's not my fault Jake has gone north. He could come to my door tomorrow wanting to talk, and I'd let him in. I just hope that day doesn't take 10 or 20 years. Some have wondered how small of a town I live in. For things to have spread so fast, it's actually not that small of a town, more of a below-average sized city. But one thing that made it possible for word to spread so fast was family. I personally come from a small family, but my wife came from one that's, quite frankly, huge and very close-knit. When I tell you that her extended family is everywhere around the city, I am not exaggerating. I can run into one of them at any given time, just walking around or going to the store. A lot of these relatives are the type to love gossip, and when my son went looking for familial support for his actions online, that's when the gossip train started. First, they told Jake off for what he'd done. Then, they started telling everybody they knew about what happened. I never wanted it to escalate like that, but it just did on its own. It just turned into one of those 15 minutes of infamy situations for Jake, and should have died down quickly. But my son's ex, Sarah, only made it worse by telling everyone she knew in order to try and get support. That basically doubled the problems, as both of them lost all their friends over the situation. So many people I don't know messaged me that I never gave my contact details to. I have no idea how they got them, but it doesn't really matter anymore. Now that my son has left, people have simmered down about it. I managed to get most of the extended family to take down their social media posts about Jake within the first week or two, but by then, the damage had already been done. Anyway, I put out the word asking people to remove any posts made about the situation, and essentially begged them to just let this end. I didn't want to be in the spotlight. I just wanted things to go back to normal. But the escalation by both Jake and Sarah only made things worse. Also, some wondered about the guy who recognized Jake in a bar and started a conflict with him. I've heard he was a neighbor of one of Jake's former friends, so it's no surprise he knew what Jake looked like, if that really is the case. And yes, despite my age, I do enjoy some old video games. I don't own any of the old consoles anymore, but I keep some of the games I loved when I was young as ROMs to play on my PC. They're a good way to unwind once in a while. Neither of my kids have had an interest in these old games, and my wife never cared for them either, so it was pretty much just me that liked them. But I don't play them frequently. Anyway, I play through Dragon Warrior once or twice a year at most, and I usually fast play it with cheat codes because I am not a skilled player, never have been. I even used the old Game Genie back in the day. My son was a gold digger too. I did not expect to make another post on this account ever again, let alone one so soon after what was supposed to be my final update. but I was recently messaged by someone on social media using a burner account that said they had some extra details on Jake and Sarah that I didn't know. They wouldn't say who they are, other than the fact that they were someone close to Sarah. I was just hoping to put a bookend to the situation, and then here comes someone anonymous playing the deep throat informant. So I can't confirm or deny any of this information I got from them. But from what they told me, apparently Sarah's parents are loaded. Well, the person stated my son Jake was only still with Sarah, despite her abusive craziness, because her parents are wealthy, meaning he was also acting like a gold digger, and that he needed as impressive of a ring as possible to woo Sarah with. I'm not sure I want to believe it, but it feels like it makes sense on some level. If Jake wanted to marry into wealth, then a lot of his behavior as of late really seems to fit the situation. Now, I can't say if all of what was said is actually true, but if it is, it would mean that my son never really loved Sarah, and it was all about money. Sigh. Isn't it always these days? But in the end, I'm not sure it would have panned out the way Jake wanted. The person who messaged me said that Sarah was the black sheep of her family, a spoiled brat with endless demands, which is why her parents sent her to live out here to work a job and have a taste of real life. She was apparently extremely pissed off at them for not bankrolling her life anymore. The person messaging me said that Sarah figured that if she got married, her parents would accept her back. But she had such. I have a hard time wrapping my head around this, and all of that kind of calls into question Sarah's parents saying she was once a good kid. Maybe she was, and then went crazy in her teens or something. I don't know. This could just be someone yanking my chain for fun, or it's possibly the whole reason my son tried to rush into Mar and Sarah. Either way, it's left me with more questions about my son than ever, but he isn't here to answer them anymore, so I'm just distraught about the whole situation. My daughter, Amber, said that she believes what this person told me and that Jake has acted like he wanted to be rich ever since he inherited money from his mother. After she passed, I think I'm going to need another day of retro gaming on my PC and some tubs of ice cream. Amber said cherry ice cream would be more fitting than vanilla this time. Not sure if that's some other modern reference I don't understand, but I think I just need a mental break. I'd like to take a vacation to the coast, but I don't have the time. Maybe in the spring. I am beyond seriously hoping this is the last update I have to post. I just want to be done with this situation. I'm going to be having Christmas without my son for the first time in over 20 years, and it's even sadder that my wife is gone too. Just me and my daughter now. But at least my wife's extended family is very supportive, and we'll be seeing them soon on Christmas Eve. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.